Stream starting soon.
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 2, 1.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Collide Livestream from my apartment. Yes, this is where I live. This is my home. You know, my humble abode, if you will. Got my Cowboys blanket in the back there. Anyway, I hope that you're having a wonderful, wonderful time wherever you are on this Wednesday night, or in the future. You could be watching this because this is on the internet and anybody can watch it anytime they want. But for those of you who are here live tonight, we have some special stuff going on. Good lessons planned. This is our final week of In His Image, and this is going to be I'm not going to say it's a big ending to the series, but this has been a long series, and we've covered a lot of things, a lot of heavy stuff. Kind of definitely we're diving a little deeper, maybe thinking a little harder than we normally do, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. There's definitely a time and place for that, and these are heavy issues that we're talking about. But tonight, we before we begin our our lesson in His image, we do have a game. What up, Billy? How's it going, man? How are you doing? We do have a game that we're playing tonight, and this game. What up, Lexi? How's it going? This game is called, and let me pull this up here. This game is called Before You Were Born. Before You Were Born. So it's pretty simple idea. I name an event. We name an event. Whatever. I'm gonna name an event, and you decide if it happened before or after you were born. Make sense? Seem easy enough? Here's what we need to do first. Before we do this, I need everybody to comment their birth date. So mine is October 3rd, 1989. So you would put, like I would put October 3rd, 1989. So you, whatever day you were born on, the day, month, and year, put that down. What? Lexi just said she found out she actually gets to start college in person, and she found that an hour ago. She found that out an hour ago. That's super exciting. That's very exciting, Lexi. Very cool stuff. You get to do college like a normal person. How exciting. How exciting. All right, so let's go ahead and put out put in the comments, put your birth date. There we go, Lexi. Born April 15th, 2002. Billy, if you'll put your birth date, then we can, this is just to verify so we can make this easy. All right, so July 11th, 2008. So Billy's got a birthday coming up. Lexi just had a birthday. Look at that. So much fun. All right, so here's how this works. Here's the first question. Okay, Google purchased YouTube for $1.65 billion. Do you think that happened before or after you were born? So this happened on a specific date. Do you think it happened before or after you were born? What do you think? Before or after you were born? All right. I like you. You like the little, we're using this like window and window flip back and forth thing tonight. So this is we don't go back after Thanksgiving, so as normal as I can be. Okay. Why do you not go back after Thanksgiving? That's weird. All right, so you're going to try to guess, did this happen? Oh yeah, Lexi's just amazed that Billy was born in 2008. I guess that's the. So Lexi says this happened after she was born. Billy says this happened before he was born. The answer is October 9th, 2006 is when this happened. So you're both right. It happened after Lexi was born, but before Billy was born. I'll give you a hint. All the things in here are after I was born. Okay, I remember all of these things, but it's for youth, so it has to be kind of in these years of things where it could be before or after, where all these things are after I was born, because I'm old. Okay, so next question: Apple launched iTunes. When did Apple launch iTunes? Was that before or after you were born? They said they think, so Lexi's saying, talking about school, they think people will contract COVID over the break and will spread it. Well, that could really happen at any time. But I guess the people around families, whatever. People being born after 2006 just shock me. Why does that shock you? Lexi, people being born. Oh, man. Oh, wow. Fun fact. I graduated high school before Billy was born. So, there you go. Lexi's going to say this happened before she was born. Billy, what do you think? All right, Billy already answered, I think. No, he didn't. Well, anyway, here we go. Apple launched iTunes on April 28th, 2003. So that was after Lexi was born, but before Billy was born. All right. Next one here. YouTube was created. When was YouTube created? When was YouTube created? Was it before you were born or after you were born? Before you were born or after you were born? That is the crazy thing. I think it's 1999, but I don't know. So you think YouTube was created in 1999? So you're going to say it was before you were born. Or maybe you're still talking about, I think you're still talking about Apple launched iTunes. Okay, so Lexi says after, and Billy says before. YouTube was created February 14th, 2005. So you're both correct. It was after Lexi, before Billy. That might be a lot of the answers to this one. YouTube is relatively new. Sure. 2005, 15 years ago, relatively new, I guess. Sure. I was in high school when it was created. And the early days of YouTube were the Wild West. All right. They were the Wild West. All right. So Facebook is launched. Is this before or after you were born? Before you were born or after you were born? Before Facebook being launched, before or after you were born? Let's see. Let's get some answers in there. I think the storm's rolling in now. Let's check the weather app. It is definitely not rolling in yet. But it's getting pretty windy out there. Anyway, all right. Lexi says that Facebook launched after she was born. Billy thinks that Facebook launched after he was born. The answer is it was launched February 4th, 2004. Billy wasn't born for another 4 years. All right, so Lexi's correct, Billy's incorrect. So here we go, keep on rolling. Apple released the first iPhone before or after you were born? What do you think? Before or after you were born, when Apple released the first iPhone. Here's the iPhone 11, right? Not flexing, just saying. Oh, look, you can see the reflection of my computer screen there. Look, you can see all y'all's comments. There's the other monitor. There's my, all these things. Okay, so All right. So, Apple released the first iPhone before or after you were born? Lexi says it was after she was born, and I remember my mom. So, let's see. You remember your mom's 3G, and it was wild. Yeah. Let's see. Billy says it's before. The answer is June 29th, 2007. So it is after Lexi was born, just barely before Billy was born. So he is correct. 1 year before he was born, the iPhone came out. I had the first generation iPhone. It came out the summer before my senior year of high school, and my birthday is in October. And they also released the iPod Touch that year, and this is I have this memory. For my birthday, my parents were like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of want a new iPod because I had like an iPod Mini, and like it was like whatever." And they're like, "Oh, we can get you an iPod Touch." They get me an iPod Touch, and I remember my youth pastor at the time saying, "Sorry, I'll tell this story. I'll finish the story after we ask the next one." So Kelly Clarkson won the first season of American Idol. Before or after you were born? Before or after you were born? What is it? So, back to the iPhone story. I had an iPod Touch, October 2007, and I had it for like 1 day, and my youth pastor goes, "Why'd you get an iPod Touch? It's like the iPhone is basically an iPod Touch, costs like basically the same price, but it's a phone." And I was like, "You're right." And so I go to my parents, I'm like, "Hey, can we return this and get the phone?" And they were like, "Sure." And so that's how I ended up with the first generation iPhone. I like to consider myself a trendsetter. All right. It pales in comparison to what we have today. Like it's shameful how bad it is to today's technology. All right. So let's see. What up, Linnea? How's it going? We're playing a game called Before You Were Born. What we're doing is we have things that happened, right? And you have to figure out whether it's before or after you were born. So what we want to do is put your date of birth, like so day, month, year, month, day, year. Put that in the chat, and then for each one of these, answer before or after. So Kelly Clarkson won the first season of American Idol. Lexi says it happened before she was born. So does Billy. The answer is September 4th, 2002. This just barely happened after Lexi was born. And Billy, this well happened before you were born. So Billy's correct. Lexi, sorry, didn't quite get this one. But it was very close. It was very close. All right, so the next question. Wikipedia was created. Wikipedia was created. What do you think? Oh, y'all lost power? Is that storm coming in? I'm a check. It looks like it's yeah, it's getting a little windy. Sorry, this is how live streams work, Sometimes you get off the camera. You walk away. Anyway, so all right, Wikipedia was created. Do you think that was before or after you were born? Let me see it there in the chat. Lexi says before, ? She's not sure. Oh, that makes sense, yeah. You're coming from Carlsbad, so it's hitting y'all first. That makes sense. Linnea, still waiting to hear. We would love to have you play. Let us know when you're born. You can answer these questions with us. Billy, before or after you were born, what do you think? Wikipedia. We'll see the answer here. Wikipedia was created January 15th, 2001. So it was before any of y'all was born. That's honestly a lot earlier than I thought it would have been created. 2001. January 15th, 2001, I would have been in elementary school. I think I've been in 5th grade. All right. Next one here. Toy Story 2 hits theaters. When did this happen? Before or after you were born? Toy Story 2. Toy Story 4 came out last year in 2019. Toy Story 3, do you know when that came out? Do you know when Toy Story 1 came out? Maybe that could help you figure things out here. The wind is really picking up outside. So, what do you think? So, looks like Lexi says that Toy Story 2 hit theaters after she was born. Anyone else? Anyone else? Let's see the answer. Toy Story 2 hit theaters November 24th, 1999. So that would be before Lexi was born, before any of y'all were born. Toy Story series has been going on forever. The first one, I believe, came out in 1995 or 1996. Then the second one came out in 1999. And it wasn't until 2010 that Toy Story 3 came out. And then 2019, Toy Story 4. So it has spread across, three decades? Yeah, 3 decades of movie going for 4 movies, and they're all pretty good. Toy Story 3 is probably my favorite. Anyway, not important. SpongeBob SquarePants first TV episode premiered before or after you were born? Lexi says she's going to have to get off because she didn't have power well enough. Well, we'll miss you, Lexi. We will miss you. Let us know if everything's okay up there in Carlsbad. SpongeBob SquarePants first TV episode premiered before or after you were born. Let's see. It was May 1st, 1999. May 1st, 1999. That was quite some time ago. I was in elementary school. All right, so Sony, here's the next one. Oh, we got to... Okay, well, this one kind of glitched. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. We can't get that one to show up. So the last one was Sony released the PlayStation 2 video game console. It was March 4th, 2000. So there's another date, probably before any of y'all. All right. We're going to have a couple of tiebreaker. There's not really tiebreakers. We kind of look at these, though. Name the year Microsoft released the Xbox 360. This is for bonus points. It's not a before or after. Just name the year. If you can name the year, all right. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Did you get 2005? And the second tiebreaker is name the day and month Microsoft released the Xbox 360. So we know it's 2005. Think about it. Think about it. Did you say January 22nd, 2005? Well, there you go. That is before you were born. I hope you enjoyed that game. I hope you had fun playing that game. Looks like a few of y'all have... It looks like everyone's kind of maybe checked out. But that's okay. We're going to continue on with our lesson. So we are here in week 5 of In His Image, right? And I just gotta fix a few things here, and then we can get started. All right. Okay. All right. So let's get started with this week's lesson, message, whatever you want to call it. Oh, before we do, I just want to, I'm trying to put this, oh, there we go. Okay. I'm trying to be able to see my notes, see y'all, and see these slides at the same time. And it is a hassle. Okay, but I think we got it. I think we finally got to a good place. So, in His image. This has been a long series, but a good series where we've talked about a lot of really important things, a lot of things that are kind of big discussion points, big things in our culture today, in our world, and we've talked about. We've talked about hookup culture. We've talked about abortion, euthanasia, homosexuality, all these things. But we really started with, we wanted to look at what it meant that we were made in the image of God, and how that truth, that fact that we are made in the image of God, how that ultimately shapes our worldview as believers in Jesus Christ, as Christians, right? And because the way we see the world is that we are made in the image of God, we as human beings are made in the image of God, right? And that we are not just a random accident, we're not just a mistake, we're not just a collection of cells, we're like, there is meaning, there is purpose to life, there is significance, right? And so that affects so many things. And tonight, we're going to be talking about how this affects, how being made in His image affects the topic of gender identity, right? Gender identity. So this is something that is all over culture. It seems like, to me, it seems like this is something that has really kind of grown in the conversation of our society in the last 5, maybe 10 years, right? And this whole idea that gender identity says that regardless of your actual biological sex, right, that like male or female, you as the individual may feel more comfortable identifying as a different gender than you actually are, right? So this is saying like, well, you were born like biologically male, right? Like myself, if I'm born biologically male, but if I felt like I identified more with that of a female, then my gender identity would be female, right? Even though born a male, biologically male, everything about me is a male, but I choose to say that what I am is a woman, right? And this is you may have seen this in culture, and here's the thing, here's kind of the and I understand this is a hot button, and some people will get really upset, or maybe you disagree with me, maybe other people disagree with me. That's okay. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're listening. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because we can talk about what a Christian worldview, what Scripture kind of points to and says about this whole idea of gender identity. Billy, his power went out too, but it seems like maybe you're back on. Maybe you got power again. So let's start by just being honest, right? Gender identity, and this whole idea that somebody can be one thing but identify as another, can get really confusing, right? And sometimes this thing of misgendering can happen, where somebody may look like one sex, one gender, and someone may call them that they might identify in that way, but that person goes, even though they might look like a male, you call them he or him or whatever, but that person really identifies as a woman. This person may get really upset about that. And some people, but maybe some people don't. Maybe they understand. They go, hey, you didn't know that. But this can be confusing, right? Like because we see one thing or what looks like one thing to us, and then somebody says, no, I identify as a different thing, and it can be really confusing. And maybe somebody goes kind of a deeper level, right? And they go, hey, I was born male, but now I identify as female, and I'm attracted to this person. Or maybe even you've even heard people say, hey, I don't identify as male or female, I identify as neither, right? I'm non-binary. I'm not male or female. Or maybe someone says they're gender fluid, right? Which in this case means that like one day they may feel more masculine, and the next day they may feel more feminine. And their gender is not something they've pinned down and they don't want to pin down. And so all of these things, right, about gender identity can get really, really confusing and really hard to keep up with. And maybe you're watching and you're going, yeah, and I try to keep up with this, and I don't even want, like, and maybe you're sitting there going, I don't want to offend people, right? Maybe you're sitting there and you're going, I really want to use the correct pronouns to address people. Like if they want to be called a woman, I want to say they're a woman, right? Or if they're to be called a man, I want to say they're a man. Whether or not that's their true biological sex, whatever they want to be called, that's what I want to call them. Right? Maybe that's where you are, right? And I'm not saying that's pretty nice, that's polite, right? But it is confusing. And so we want to talk about gender identity and what this means and why this idea is so, it seems so new, it seems so maybe seems so normal to you. Maybe it seems natural. Maybe it doesn't seem normal or natural, right? And we're going to kind of talk about that. But first, we need to talk about something that we talked about last week, and that's postmodern thought. Now, postmodern thought, as we talked about last week, says that truth is relative, right? And that's actually how we get to the point where we can say that your gender identity is different from your biological sex, right? Because to you, right, if maybe not you, but a person, if a person, right, says that their gender identity is different than their biological sex, right, to them, that is their truth, right? And in postmodern world, which we live in, truth is relative, and there is no absolute truths, which we talked about last week is a contradiction in itself. There has to be truths because the whole foundation of postmodernism says that truth is relative, but in that statement you're making an absolute truth, even though you just said there is no absolute truth. So postmodern thought, which we live in a postmodern world, says your gender identity is however you want it to be. That ignores biological facts, right? It ignores how God actually made you to be. And here's another little chart that we've kind of looked at this 2-story chart here in several of our weeks now. And here's this week's, right? So we have the upper level, right? This is your gender, right? This is what you say is your identity as your gender identity. That's the upper story. That is this is who I am. This is my truth, right? This is the metaphysical realm, right? It doesn't take place in biological reality. It takes place in how I perceive myself. Then below that is your sex. This is the material truth, like that you may be a woman in biologically, you may be a man biologically, but whichever one it is, this culture says that is your sex. And they actually make this distinction that gender and sex, that gender and sex are not the same thing, right? Culture says that you can be, your biological sex can be male, but your gender can be female, and that's okay because the two are not the same thing. They're not connected really at all. That these two, it's this dichotomy of things. It's this separation, saying that, well, your gender is one thing and your sex is another, and they really don't have anything to do with each other, right? Well, this is another example of a false dichotomy, right? That says that gender and sex are not the same thing and they have no connection to each other. But in a Christian worldview, right, we look at our bodies and our sexuality and our sex, our gender, right? We as Christians we would say those are the same thing, right? But because who you are is not, you cannot separate that from how you were made, right? So to say that even though you were made in the image of God as a male or a female, right? To say that you are the opposite or something different than that is to deny reality, right? To deny the truth that God made you a specific way even if you feel differently, it doesn't make you a different thing from how you were made. So you actually cannot, this is Christian life, right? We are not, what we think about ourselves and what we actually are cannot be separated. This is not how God made us to be, right? Now, does this happen? Yeah, sure, you can do that. But that's not living out your full potential of who God made you to be. Now, we've looked at Genesis several times in this series to look at different things, and we're going to look back at Genesis 1:27. It's a familiar verse. We looked at it before, and it's in the creation account when God has created everything, and he gets to humans, and there's this part where it says in verse 27 of Genesis 1, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Right? So we see that in God's good and perfect order, he made both males and females. Now God didn't make, biological male that identifies as female, and God didn't make, something that is neither of those or both of those, or God didn't make these things. Now, how do we get to a place where people feel different than what they are? Well, we have the fall. We have that when sin entered the world, right? Because we live in a broken, corrupt world, because of the fall, not because God made us that way, but because we live in a sinful world and we live in a sinful state, things are not how God originally intended them to be and originally made them to be, right? That's why none of us are perfect. That's why we all have flaws. That's why we all have things that are not perfect about us, right? And so because we live in this fallen world, sometimes we have situations where people think that they were meant to be something they were not, right? Now, here's something I want to talk about before we continue. Is this, and we said this last week, we were made with purpose and for a purpose. We were made with purpose and for a purpose, right? You were made with purpose and for a purpose. Do you know that about yourself? That God was not, it wasn't just some random chance or some act that humans came into existence, and that you were made with a purpose and for a purpose. The purpose you were made for is to honor God with your life, and he made you purposefully. But we all have issues, we have flaws, because we live in a fallen world, but you were made for a purpose. If you are a biological male, you were meant to be, your purpose was to be a man. If you were biologically female, your purpose is to be a woman. That is part of your purpose. That's not all of your purpose. It's not all encompassing, but part of who you are and what you are supposed to be and who you are supposed to be is directly tied to your biological sex, right? And so, where does this leave us? Where does this bring us to, right? The reality is that gender confusion is real, right? There's no denying it, that people are confused or frustrated, or maybe they're not, maybe they're beyond confusion, right? They go, no, I'm not confused. I know, this is what they may say. They may say, hey, I know that even though I am biologically a male, I was really meant to be a woman, or I feel more like a woman. And they go, I'm not confused. I was just born wrong. Right? And maybe that's what they'll say, or God made me the wrong way. Well, that's not true. God did not make you the wrong way. God did not make you a male or make you a female when you were supposed to be something else. That's not what, God does not work that way. God does not make a mistake and put a wrong gender in you, right? And you feel differently. Now, that does not mean that the truth that God did not make a mistake for you does not mean that you don't have confusion about it, or that you feel strongly a different way. So I'm not here to deny that gender confusion isn't real, because it is real, right? In fact, there's a term, a psychological term used to classify people, and that's gender dysphoria. General term, gender confusion, disorder, this kind of thing, right? It's just simply saying that, like, people born one way, but they find their identity, they find who they think they are deep down inside is a different way. And this can be very frustrating. I do not I do feel empathy for people who struggle with this, right? For people who go, I was born a woman, but I feel like a man, or vice versa. I feel empathy for those people. That's got to be a very hard place to live. But that's not who they were meant to be. They were meant to be what their physical body says they were meant to be. So if they were born a man, they were meant to be a man, even though they may feel differently about it, right? And so, but there is one other thing. There's one area we haven't really talked about that, and that's intersex. Intersex are people that are born either that are maybe born with their genitalia is maybe not fully developed one way or the other, or their sex is kind of a mixture of the two. They're kind of this not quite male, not quite female, right? And this is also a condition of being in a fallen world, because sometimes our bodies, from a biological, from a molecular level, aren't perfect, right? Like, some people, very few amount of people, but some people are intersex, right? Some people are born as conjoined twins, right? That's not how God intended it, but sometimes they're born with these defects, and that's because we live in a fallen world. Some people are born with genetic disorders that they live with their whole life, and these are tragedies that this happens, but this is not God's plan. This is not God's intention. It's because we live in a fallen world, and that is intersex people. That is a whole nother issue, right? Because these are actually people that have some kind of physical, biological, abnormality about them that is different than, well, I'm like a normal male that feels like a woman, right? That's a different conversation, right? But we're talking about gender confusion. Now, kind of one thing I want to talk about this is the idea of masculinity and femininity, right? Because to some extent, right, the people who struggle with gender confusion would say that, hey, I don't feel like, if they're born a man and they say, I don't identify with a lot of the things that masculinity is tied to. I actually identify more with the things that femininity is tied to. And that's actually a really good point, because sometimes men and women, right, have tendencies to be drawn to certain things, and maybe if you are a man or a woman and you're drawn to the things of the opposite sex, I could very easily see how you would go, yeah, maybe I identify more with that other sex, and maybe that's what I was meant to be. I could see how you would get there. And so that's why I want to talk about this idea of the difference between stereotypes and tendencies, right? Because there is a question that has to be raised, is what does it mean to be male and what does it mean to be female? And really, the biggest definition, the biggest way we can describe what it means to be male and what it means to be female is that you are biologically that thing, right? So what's the biggest way to, what's the, like, how would you define what a man is? Well, are you biologically a man? Because that's the biggest identifier, right? It's not whether you like sports. It's not whether you like hunting. It's not whether you like working on cars. It's not whether you like the color blue. These are stereotypes, right? These are things that our culture, right, has said these are things that typically men do, right? Stereotypes. I want to say that there are stereotypes and there are tendencies, right? And it's kind of maybe a blurry line here. A stereotype says, like, men should like these things, right? That's a stereotype. A tendency is for us to go, hey, you know what? Men have a tendency of liking these things. Does that mean that those are male things and that the things that women like are female things? No. they're tendencies of male and female. These are not defining things, right? But if somebody of one sex tends to identify with the stereotypes of the other sex, they might think that that's who they are to be. But what I want to make clear is that just because it's a tendency, right, does not mean that it has to be the stereotype that you have to follow, right? So if you're a guy and you like rough and tumble things and you like grunting and that's fine. You're probably like most guys. If you're a girl and you like things that are more emotionally driven, or you like things that are more not as rough, that's fine. Those are tendencies for women. But if you're a guy and you like the things that most women tend to like, that doesn't make you less of a guy. And if you're a girl and you say, I like to do a lot of the things that guys like to do, that doesn't make you a guy. That just means you like some of these tendencies that guys are typically tied to. So here's what I would say, right? It's kind of maybe this will help you, right? If you maybe feel like you don't fit the stereotypes or what culture says a man is and you're a man, or a woman is and you're a woman. What I want to say to you is that there's a lot of things that are tendencies for men and women, but these are not defining features of men and women. The defining feature of a man and woman is your biology. It's what God made you to be, right? There's no necessarily right way to be a man and to be a woman just based on feelings and interests and things like that. Those are not necessarily masculine or feminine things. So just because you feel more you identify more with the tendencies of one gender that you are not, does not mean that you are that gender. Just means that you're more drawn to those tendencies. And that's okay. It's okay to like things that your gender normally doesn't like, right? And so, where does this bring us, right? Where does this bring us that we're here and we're going, hey, we talked about stereotypes, we're talking about tendency, we're talking about what it means to be male and female, and we said, hey, the whole idea of separating gender and sex is a false dichotomy, right? That comes from postmodern thinking, and not from a Christian worldview, because we know that God made us man and woman, and that just because the things we like or the way we feel, that doesn't make us not the thing that God made us. And so I want to look at a passage in Ephesians that Paul wrote Ephesians and wrote to the church at Ephesus, and we have Ephesians 4, 17 through 24, and he kind of talks about something very relevant to this whole idea of gender identity. Here's what he says. Now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. So let's stop real quick right here. So he's talking to Christians in Ephesus, and he's saying, hey, I'm saying this to you in the Lord. This is the truth. He's like, you must not walk as the Gentiles do. Don't walk as the Gentiles do anymore. And so we can take this today, and if we're looking at it from our perspective, if we can kind of reach in and hear how Paul is talking to them and kind of take from it some truth to us today, I think it's pretty applicable, right? Because he's saying you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. So we could take this as, hey, do not walk, if you're a Christian, if you're all of Christ, don't walk the way the world walks, right? In the futility of their minds. So what does that mean? He's saying, do not think like the world thinks. The world thinks one way, but that's not how you're to think. You're to think how God thinks, how Christ is calling us to think. Okay, so the futility that the Gentiles would think of, right? Today, we could think of this as this whole gender identity thing. This whole gender identity comes out of a postmodern worldview that is not the worldview of a Christian, right? Because a postmodern worldview says that your biology doesn't matter. All that matters is how you feel, right? And that's to completely disregard how God made you. And so he continues on. So don't think how the Gentiles think anymore. The way they think is futile. Verse 18 says, they are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to their hardness of heart. So he's saying that the Gentiles who think Gentile ways, who think in a worldly way, so we can think about this as how does the world think, right? So they've darkened their understanding, alienating them from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardness of their heart. So the world has ignored God, right, and said that God doesn't matter, the things that God has made doesn't matter. What matters, right, in this postmodern world of thinking is the only truth that matters is what I believe about myself. And there is no other truth that matters. But a Christian worldview says, what Paul is trying to see this is that there are eternal truths that matter. And in this situation, what we're talking about, the eternal truth that matters is that you're made by God in a specific way. If you are biologically a man, you were made to be a man. If you're a biological woman, you're made to be a woman, right? And so here's what he keeps on saying. Verse 19, they have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. So they become callous. And they've given themselves up to sensuality, right? We kind of talked about this last week in Romans, where talked about homosexuality and God gave them up to that, right? Greedy to practice every kind of impurity. In verse 20 it says this is huge, but this is not the way you learned Christ. Right? So Paul is saying this is not how you learned Christ. The way you learn Christ is something different. Not the way the world lives, but it's something different. Here's then verse 21. Assuming that you have heard about him and were taught in him as the truth is in Jesus. So assuming that you've been taught the truth, to put off your old self. So what is the truth that we're assuming you've been taught? It's that you need to put off your old self, the old you, the old way of thinking. Put it off, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed. So get rid of the old self because it's been corrupted, right? Your former self has been corrupted. Get rid of it. And you need to be renewed in the spirit of your minds and to put on the new self created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. And this sounds like the language here that Paul uses sounds so much like something we've heard. Being made in his image, right? Verse 24, and to put on the new self created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. So here Paul is telling believers, he's saying the way the world thinks is corrupt, and it's not the way that God created things to be. It's not the way that we should be living as Christians and should be thinking as Christians. And he's saying, throw off the old self, put on the new self, so that you can look like the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. You see, this is profound, and this has to do with gender identity. You may be wondering, but it has to do with gender identity because this way of thinking, that the way I live is different, right? The way I want to live is different than the way that God made me, right? The way I want to see reality, the way I want to see myself is different than the way God made me. And God is saying, that's wrong. That's corrupt. That's perversion of truth in this world. The truth is, you were made in my image. You are my daughter. You are my son. I made you male, or I made you female, and that's who you are. Throw off your old way of thinking, which may have been that I find my gender identity in something else. I find my sexuality in something else. I find my the way I view other people in some other way. But God is saying, no, take on a new self that sees people as made in the image of God, that he did not make mistakes with us, that he did not make us to be something we were not, and he made us to live a specific way. And those things are holy. Our sexuality is to be holy. Our gender identity, the way we view ourselves, is to be holy, like the way that God views us. The way we view the people is meant to be holy, right? So here's something I want us to see, is that we're all made in his image, but we've all been corrupted by sin. All of us. You've been corrupted by sin. I've been corrupted by sin. We're still all made in his image. We're still all valuable. We're still all worthy. But we've been corrupted by sin in some way. And maybe you know someone who the way they've been corrupted by sin is that they view themselves in a different gender identity than how God made them to be. Maybe that's the sin that's corrupted someone you know. Or maybe that's the sin that's corrupted you. And that is not a popular thing to say, right? That's not a popular opinion in today's culture, but that is the truth. That we're all made in his image, but we've all been corrupted in some way by some sin. Probably many sins, right? It's not just one sin that we struggle with. It's a multitude of sins that we struggle with. And we're just talking about a few that are specific to our bodies, right? And so how do we go from this corruption that we're made in his image, but we're all corrupted by sin? But Paul in Ephesians, right? He's calling us. He says, "And put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in righteousness and holiness." He's calling us to righteousness and holiness. So how do we beat this corruption of sin? How do we do that? And here's our bottom line for tonight. We're almost done, but here's our bottom line. To live in his image, we must put on the true and new self. We must look at Scripture and see, God, how did you call us? What are we called to do? How are we called to live? How are we called to view our own bodies? How are we called to view our sexuality? How are we called to view our gender, right? As not something that we want to make up in our minds, but who we actually were made to be. To live in his image, we must put on the true and new self. To live in his image, you must, I must, we must put on the true and new self. If we want to be people who live in his image, if we want to be people that say, God created me, God created you, God created everyone to live and be a specific way, and then sin came in and messed it up. But if we want to go back to the way that God intended things, if we want to live the best way we can, which is how God intended us to live, we must put on the true and new self. And that begins, like we talked about, with the changing of the mind, right? To repent, to turn and believe something new, to not believe these corrupt ideas that postmodernism brings, and to believe the truth of Scripture. So, what are our takeaways? First one is this: you are not a mistake. You're not. You may have flaws. You may have sins. You may be broken, corrupt, whatever. Hey, guess what? Me too. Me too. But you're not a mistake. Who you are, how God made you to be, is not a mistake. And if you're struggling with sexual attractionness, or you're struggling with gender identity, or maybe you're struggling with just sexual sin, sexual temptation, know that that's not how God made you to be. He created you a specific way. You're not a mistake. The things you struggle with, the things that have corrupted us, that's not who you were meant to be. God wants you to be something different. He made you in his image, and he made you special and unique because of that. And because he wants a relationship with you, he wants you to live how he made you to live. Not because, just because he wants you to follow the rules, but he made you a specific way, and if you live the way he wants you to live, it'll actually be better for you. Your life will be better for it. And here's the second thing. You're not a mistake. Here's the second thing. And this is specifically for Christians. The first one was for everybody. This one's specifically for Christians. We need to show love and acceptance to those whose lives have been deeply damaged by postmodern sexual theories. The idea of hookup culture, the idea of gender identity, the homosexual lifestyles, all these things come from postmodern sexual theories. Come from new thoughts of this age, right? From this decade, this century, these last couple centuries. These are come from thoughts, and they're not necessarily new to our few centuries that recently, but people have been believing lies ever since God created us, ever since the fall of man. But here's the thing: we're not here to condemn these people. We want to love them, we want to accept them because we want them to know the love of Christ. So we need to show love and acceptance to those whose lives have been deeply damaged by this. Now, acceptance does not mean approval of sin. Acceptance means that we acknowledge that we all have sinned, and we want you to be a part of the family of God. And what does this mean? This is the balance of grace and truth. Right? Grace for all. Grace abounds. We want grace to abound. We want it to cover everything. I want grace to cover me. I want grace to cover you. I want grace to cover everyone. Because God's grace is so good. But you know what's also good is God's truth. God wants to extend grace, but there is truth out there. There's truth to be found. And there's truth about who we are and our bodies. So will you love and accept those who've been deeply damaged? Because maybe you have. Maybe you've been deeply damaged. And maybe you're watching this and you go, I can see I've been damaged by these wrong thoughts and these wrong things. And if you don't know Christ, if you've never accepted Christ, I pray that you would begin your faith journey today and ask Christ to be the Lord and Savior of your life. To say, Lord, I trust you. I don't understand everything, and I don't always get it. But Lord, I know I'm broken. I know I'm sinful. And Lord, I know I need your forgiveness. And Jesus came ultimately. He died on the cross and rose from the grave to die for our sins. And that's the only way, through Jesus Christ, through that forgiveness, that we're able to have a relationship with God. And if you haven't done that, I pray that you would do that. If you do that, if you decide to make that decision tonight, let me know. Reach out. Let me know. We want to know. But also, if you're struggling with any of these things we talked about in the series, please also reach out. There is no shame. You will not be condemned. I'm not here to condemn. I'm here to help. But help requires truth. And the truth is, you were made to live a specific way. God made you in his image to walk in holiness. And to do that, we need to put on the new and true self to walk in his image. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for sending your son, Jesus, to die for us so that we can be forgiven and we can have that relationship with you. Lord, he came and died for us so that we would know you and we would know how you want us to live. Lord, I pray for any student, any adult watching this right now. Lord, if they need someone to talk to, they can reach out. Lord, I'd be more than happy to begin a discussion about any of these things we've talked about in this series. Lord, thank you for all that you do. And thank you so much for making us in your image. We ask this in your name. Amen. All right, we have some announcements that I want to talk about real quick. First thing, if you aren't part of our Remind text groups, you want to get on that, text at GCBCYM to 81010 and get on that. Get on that Remind group. It's great. It's really really helpful. It's probably the best way that we communicate with one another. And so get on that Remind. I'm just kind of leaving it there for a little bit so people can see it. Next thing, we have an Instagram and we have a Facebook. You can go follow both of those. We have a Twitter. We never used it. I need to take that off. But Instagram, Facebook, those are two big social medias we have. All right, so I said, and I didn't say this at the beginning of the thing, but I said in the Remind today we had two big announcements. And here they are. Here are two big announcements. Camp Collide 2020, June 19th through 23rd, is officially a go. We are going to camp June 19th through 23rd. It is going to be $150. The sign-up sheets for this should be out next week. Next week we should have sign-up sheets for camp. Be looking for those. They will be coming out. But let your friends know if they want to go to camp. We are going to start signing up for camp. If money is an issue for you, if money is a thing, you're going, hey, money's tight. I don't know. Corona really hit us hard. My family hard. We do not want you to not. We want you to go to camp. We don't want money to be an issue. You don't go to camp. The only thing that we don't want you, the only reason you wouldn't go to camp is if you were about to die. Okay, then then don't go to camp. Right? If you're sick, don't go to camp. That kind of thing. But we want you to go to camp. We want everyone to go to camp. We'll have those forms out next week. So we are going to camp. I'm very excited about this. We're going to have a fantastic time. Camp Collide is for anyone who has just completed 6th through 12th grade. So if you are in the youth group this year, you can go to camp. Camp Collide is open for anyone who just was in 6th through 12th grade. So, Billy, you can go to camp. Anybody that was in 6th grade this year absolutely can go to camp. You should all go to camp. You should all sign up. Billy, you should tell all your friends you should go to camp. And I hear the thunder now. All right, so that means I need to wrap this up quick. We have one more announcement. Here's our next big announcement. We have summer Bible studies starting next Wednesday. So a week from today, May 27th, from 6 to 7, we are going to be meeting in person up at the church for a Bible study. We'll be in the prayer room, which is where the young adults used to meet, right there next to the auditorium. That's where we'll be meeting in person. We're going to go through the entire book of Romans over the summer. It is going to be a great study. We're going to learn a lot. We've actually looked at several passages from Romans in this series. I think some people say that Romans is the best book that Paul wrote. It's great. We're going to have a great time studying this. This is for anyone 6th through 12th grade. Come 6 to 7 Wednesdays. We're meeting in person. We're going to kind of spread out in there and do kind of social distance and all that kind of thing. But we're going to be back, right? And we're going to meet in person the same time we meet for Collide during the school year. We're going to do at night, same time, but in the normal church, the big church building, the regular church building. We're going to meet over there, and it's going to be much more low key than Collide. It's going to be a Bible study, but it's going to be very good. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I think you and your friends should come. So those are our big announcements. I hope to see you next week at that Bible study at 6 o'clock. Tell your friends. We'll put that on Remind. We'll put that on social medias. It's going to be wonderful. With that is kind of all we have for tonight. This has been our last Collide of the school year. I'm gonna miss it. Gonna get a little emotional. But the summer's gonna be a lot of fun, especially now that we're definitely doing camp. So I hope to see you all next week. And we have our Zoom meeting on Sunday at 5, which will be our last Zoom meeting that we do for Clyde Small Group. And then we won't meet on Zoom again. We are doing 2 worship services on Sunday, 9 and 10:30. So you can go to one of those. After this Sunday, we will not meet for small group on Zoom, like I said, or we won't meet on small group on Zoom after this Sunday. We just won't have small group on Sunday until we're meeting again in person for small group. So It's going to be church Sunday at 9 or 10:30 for worship service, and then Wednesday night Bible study for youth. That's going to be our schedule until we start small groups back up in person on Sunday mornings. With that, I hope you have a great Wednesday night. I'll see y'all later, and I'll see you next Wednesday.